Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. First question comes from Dragon the Abandoner, who said, real quick, wanted to insert this question here first because the Q&A prompt went up a little bit late in the day. I didn't get anybody an opportunity to really ask this, but should the Browns bring in YOUNGHOE KOO from the Atlanta Falcons? Now, I think this is something that they should consider. I'm not very hard to convince when it comes to kicker, right? Like, I don't think it would be something that doesn't make sense for the Browns. I would also have to look into like why it is that YOUNGHOE KOO got kicked off of the Atlanta Falcons after being their kicker for 6 years. He's another guy who came from the spring leagues, right? Kicked for the Atlanta Legends back in 2019, made his way to the Falcons by the end of that season. He missed a couple of field goals earlier this year. So there is that, right? He missed a couple 40 to 49 yarder. I don't know. Like, he might be injured. I don't really understand why they got rid of him. They brought in Parker Romo, who is also another UFL kicker. I think he kicked for the Brahmas in 2023. So again, the spring leagues are just dominating the kicker stuff right now. It's the new meta in the NFL. Obviously, Andre Schmidt is also a former spring league kicker. So that's where teams are going to look at special teams here. It's a more one-to-one look for special teams players. So it's a real hotbed for these guys. I don't know why they decided to get off of YOUNGHOE KOO, but they did. You got to figure out what that is. And also, you know, we got to figure out, like, hey, like, how soon does this guy want to kick after being cut from the Falcons? Does he want to play this week? I can understand it not happening this week, but, you know, it is something to consider, right? Because you've had, you know, the field goal kicking issues in week 1. Week 2, he was pretty solid. I understand the Browns aren't eager to bring in a YOUNGHOE KOO, but I would at least consider him on the practice squad, you know, like get him on the practice squad. And then if something pops up, you can swap him in and out because, again, it's a veteran kicker and you can just have him take over the job for Andre Schmidt whenever you feel like it's necessary. And if he messes up, you'll probably be able to get Andre Schmidt back. So, yeah, if you're asking me about YOUNGHOE KOO, yeah, I think it's a good thing. Is this. There has been a lot of blame placed on Stefanski and the offense for the 0-2 start. I know that the defense has been amazing, but they have failed to get turnovers. Between the defense, offense, and special teams, what percentage of the blame would I put on each group for the 0-2 start? This is an interesting question. If I were to try to put a blame pie together, I think special teams probably takes the plurality, right? If we're splitting this up 3 ways, I think the errors in special teams has been egregious and kind of overlooked, right? We're talking about 1 made field goal away from winning the game. We're talking about 10 points given up on field position for the Cleveland Browns, based on what they did against Baltimore, that ended up being huge for Baltimore because it kept them in the lead for most of that game. And then obviously the wheels fell off later in the game because the Browns were pressing because they were down by 10 points. The reason they're down by 10 points, special teams. So if we're looking at the beginning part of this season, the 0-2 start, yes, the offense has not been amazing, but the offense was never promised to be amazing to win games this year. I think the schedule probably deserves a significant portion of the blame as well. I mean, like, the reality is that the Browns were never had a great chance to beat the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Got to factor that in, right? like part of why they're going 0-2. Like both, it's not like they played the Panthers twice or something like that and they're 0-2. They played the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, and then they played the Ravens at home. So one of the games you could have won. Special teams didn't really get you there. They take most of the blame, in my opinion. The offense, I think, probably number 2 in blame because they have not been able to not turn the ball over. Now, again, in the Bengals game, wasn't really that much of Joe Flacco's fault, but still, we're talking about offense. Offense didn't avoid turnover, so they're second to blame, in my opinion. And then the defense, look, the defense isn't to blame for why the Browns are losing. It's just they could do more to help the Browns win. You know, they could get turnovers. So, you know, I agree with you that defense could do more, but I'm not sitting here saying, well, I'm blaming the defense for not giving us 115% when they're already giving us like 100. You know what I mean? They could do more. They're capable of doing more, and I expect them to do more and get turnovers eventually. But if we're talking about why the Browns are 0-2, their schedule's really tough. They played Baltimore at Baltimore. That's always a tough game for Cleveland, for the Browns, for obvious reasons. The special teams were terrible, and the offense is turning the ball over. Raymond says this. Let me pull this up for you. Raymond says, I really don't think it's time to hit the panic button yet. This seems to be the toughest part of our schedule, but we've still shown some good things, especially in week 1. I just hope this team doesn't lose its composure. Am I being delusional? I think you're being insanely reasonable. It's kind of sad that you feel like you're being delusional for being reasonable. I think there is nothing wrong for feeling that way. The Browns are 0-2. They played a tough schedule. We knew they were going to play a tough schedule. We all knew 0-2 was a reality with this football team. They should have won week 1, but special teams didn't help them. You've seen a lot of good things. You've seen some things that concern you going forward. But again, look at who the Browns are playing these first 2 weeks. They're not going to have this schedule for the rest of the year. They're going to get out of this part of the schedule, you could argue, in a couple of weeks here, because I don't know if Minnesota fits the bill of being in that tough part of the schedule. And you can argue maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers don't fit the bill there either. But yeah, these first 4 weeks, we always looked at them. We always knew they were going to be tough. And we always knew it was going to be hard for the Browns to squeeze out a win there because they were playing teams consistently that are just in different places than they are. These are teams in the first 4 weeks that all have their quarterbacks, all are trying to win a championship, and the Browns are trying to reset slightly as they go forward. Blake says this: I think it's clear we need a playmaker on offense outside the quarterback position. If you had to choose today how you would like us to spend that first-round pick, assuming we take a quarterback with the earlier pick, and if it's a weapon, who are you hoping for? All right, I would love to answer this question, Blake, but before I do, got to shout out the sponsor for today, Sleeper. All right, I got my sleeper picks for this week. Real excited to bring these to you guys. So first thing on this pick that I think is going to happen in this game, I've done this before. It was successful week 1. We'll see if it's successful in week 3. I do think Jerry Jeudy is going to get more receptions this week. The Browns are going to have to get this offense going. He was very underutilized last week versus the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to make it a point of emphasis at the beginning of this game to get him the ball. They have him at 4.5. I think he'll be over 4.5 receptions for this week. Quincy is a new name to this contest. And they have Quincy, the line, well, the guess is for him is 42.5 rushing yards. I think Quincy's going to have a good day. He broke that big runoff. I think he's going to be much more comfortable running the ball after what happened in week 2, where he just got, used to taking contact, right? He's already been hit by Roquan Smith. Everything else that's going to happen to him is going to feel like a lot more light to him. So I think he's going to get a heavy workload. I think the run game is going to look slightly better this week. I don't know if they're going to look good enough to win, but I think they're going to look slightly better. Quincy Judkins, more than 42 yards. I think that's going to happen. Jordan Love, I have the Browns getting more than an interception on him. They don't think he's going to throw an interception. I think they're wrong on that. Jordan Love puts the ball in danger a lot, especially when he's pressured. I don't think he's played a defensive line that could pressure the Cleveland Browns like that. And they've been preaching it all week. Turnovers. The Browns are going to look to be opportunistic this week because they still have not registered a turnover for as much pressure as they've been creating. I think this week they get the pressure. And then Harold Fannin, I think he's going to be utilized a ton. We talked about it in my Q&A video. Harold Fannin, 34 yards. I think he'll be more than 34 yards. Those are my picks. We're going to follow them. And if you want to join in the fun, right, on Sleeper, make sure you use my promo code WORSTTAKE. Get a 100% match on up to $100 when you use promo code WORSTTAKE. Again, up to, not up to, but 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code WORSTTAKE. Thank you for Sleeper for sponsoring this video. Let's get on with it. So Blake's question again was, the Browns need a playmaker. Are they going to draft a playmaker? Who do I want them to do? One, I think it's too early to make any kind of assumption there, right? For me, I'm less focused on the Browns drafting a position than I am about the Browns drafting players. I want the Browns to draft difference makers. Whether they play offense or defense, that's what you have to make sure you do. I think people get too fixated on trying to do a grocery list with the draft. Oh, I need a left tackle. Oh, I need a linebacker. Oh, I need a cornerback, right? Like you're going to the grocery store. The grocery shopping is for free agency because these are known commodities, veteran players who you know what you're getting. If you need a left tackle, you sign a left tackle in free agency, you should be pretty sure that that guy can pan out and be your left tackle, right? More sure than you are with the draft pick is my point. A lot of people get addicted to grocery shopping in the draft. I don't think that's a good way to go about it. I think that's how the Browns went about it for like 15 years, and it was horrible. I don't want to get that kind of mindset where I'm looking at it like I'm grocery shopping in the draft. For me, it's about the player, right? If I'm drafting early, I want a playmaker. That's what I want, a difference maker. If he plays wide receiver, awesome. If he plays corner, cool. If he plays tackle, neat. If he plays quarterback, amazing. But I'm not just going to draft the quarterback to draft the quarterback. I don't want the Browns to draft the wide receiver just to draft the wide receiver. I don't want the Browns to just go there. We need this position. Let's just take this position. It's a bad way to go about it. You got to draft players you have a plan for and a vision for. If you're not doing that, you're setting yourself up to fail. So I'm not deep enough into my draft cataloging yet to have a player I feel that way about and feel good enough to say, this is the guy, right? It's way too early in the college football season. But if you're wondering how I approach it as far as what I want the team to do, and again, you can look at it very differently. I don't care much about the position as much as I care about the player. Because if you draft a player because he plays left tackle and he turns out to be Jed Wills, you didn't fucking solve anything. My bad. Let me run that back. If you draft a player, probably gonna forget to bleep it too. If I draft the player and I think I'm solving my left tackle problem, but they turn out to be Wills, you didn't solve anything, right? If you draft the player at a position, like when the Browns drafted Siaki Ika, did that solve the defensive tackle problem? They didn't solve it until they drafted difference makers at the position. We can't look at the draft as if because you spent a pick at a position, it's guaranteed to fix that position. It's not. You're drafting prospects. Again, you want to go grocery shopping, you want to fix certain positions. That's what free agency is for, in my opinion. You want to add playmakers to your team? You want to add difference makers to your team? That's what the draft is for. Let's see if I remember to edit out that original Jed Wills F-bomb. We'll see. All right. John says, after how many games, under what circumstances do you think it's reasonable to pull Flacco and see if the rookie show any promise? Presumably, if we're 0-6, it's worth seeing if Gabriel has any potential before we go into next year's draft. I really hate how it's being framed. I think we're setting up these rookies for failure because it's going to be very hard. Let's say Joe Flacco gets benched after 6 games and then Dillon Gabriel plays for the rest of the season. It's going to be hard to tell how much potential is there for Dillon if he plays the entire rest of the season. It's just not enough games. You need more than one season to really understand what a quarterback has. And the reality is, even if the Browns draft somebody next year, they're not going to want to start him right away, more than likely. And one of these guys are going to get a chance to start next year as well. So I don't look at it as a one-year thing. I also don't look at it as if the Browns need to figure out what Dillon Gabriel is before they draft somebody. I think the Browns have a pretty good idea what they think they have in Dillon. I think the Browns should have a pretty good idea on what they think they're developing in Shedeur Sanders. Those questions have to be answered internally, not externally, right? If they're doing this and their process is so blind on both these quarterbacks that they don't know anything about them until they see the field, then they have a bad process. If they feel so good about Dillon Gabriel that he could be a franchise quarterback internally, then you got to roll with whatever goes down this season and stick with your guy. If you feel so good internally about what you're seeing with Shedeur Sanders, regardless of if he plays a lot this season, if internally you're saying to yourself, we got a franchise quarterback, then okay, develop him, commit to him, give him more than a couple of games to prove his worth. Everybody thinks that this is going to be determined based on when these guys play. Your opinion publicly will be determined by that. But the Browns themselves, it's going to be about what they feel internally, what they see every day in the meeting rooms, the progress that they've seen since the start of camp. That's the stuff that they have to weigh. They can't get too focused on the results that these guys put out here because the reality is they're rookie quarterbacks. More than likely, overwhelmingly more than likely, the results are going to suck in year one. They're not going to be good, more than likely. So if they get thrown out there, they don't look good. Well, if internally you've been looking at him and saying, hey, look, he's doing all the things right, we think he's going to get over this hump, then you just got to work through that. But if nothing about your process has led you to, we think this is a future franchise guy, which I don't believe is the case for either of these quarterbacks, for the Browns at least, then you got to just look for where you think you can get a franchise guy. So I'm not a big fan of how people talk about this because I don't think it's accurate. I think people are setting themselves up for something that's not really realistic. That being said, when it's reasonable to pull Joe Flacco, I think the answer to that question is simple. The reasonable time to pull Joe Flacco is when the Cleveland Browns realistically believe that Joe Flacco is not better than Dillon Gabriel. If Joe Flacco plays the whole season, that tells you what they think of Dillon Gabriel, that tells you what they think of Shedeur Sanders. Because they don't think they're better than playing 40-year-old Joe Flacco, right? Joe Flacco should and will be out there until they are convinced with what they're seeing that starting Dillon Gabriel would actually be better, that starting Shedeur Sanders would actually be better. That's when they should see the field. And again, if they're worth seeing, they'll be out there. But if they're not worth seeing for whatever reason, if the Browns aren't confident in them over Joe Flacco, well, that tells you they're not going to stop the Browns from doing anything in the first round. And more than likely, I don't know if they play. I don't know if they don't play all season, but I don't think this question of, oh, you got to see what you got in Shedeur and you got to see getting Dillon Gabriel is going to stop the Browns from doing whatever they want to do when it comes to the draft next year or free agency or using that extra first round pick to go out and try to trade for a starter at quarterback. I don't think that's where they are. You know, we can see though. Next one comes from Michael, who says, Q, I feel hopeless. if we head into another 3-5 win season, I don't see how Kevin and AB survive. I really don't want to change regimes again. How many games do you think they need to win to survive? I don't think it matters how many games they win, if I'm being honest. Like, they can't go winless. They probably can't go like under 3. But more than likely, they went into this season with a understanding of what the results could be. They thought, hey, maybe we get a hot run from Joe Flacco and we could be over 500. But if we don't get that hot run from Joe Flacco or surprise at the quarterback position, we're likely going to be under 500. That was the expectation that I brought out on this channel. So I don't think they're going to get fired if they go under 500. And like if they win like 6 games, I don't think anybody's getting touched. They win like 5 games, I don't think anybody's getting touched, right? 4 games, I know fans would be pretty upset. Maybe they start next season on the hot seat, but they probably keep their jobs. I don't think they're in trouble. I think people are frustrated with where the Browns have been during the Watson era, and fans want their pound of flesh, but I don't think the organization feels any obligation to honor the request from fans to get their pound of flesh. I think they're going to stick through it. Rebecca says, hey, Q, pretend the Browns and Jags get a high pick this season. The Browns get a QB with the first pick. Do you think they would get an offensive line or wide receiver with the second pick? Again, I don't want to get too caught up in positional assumptions here. I think the Browns will try to take 2 difference makers in the first round. That's really it. I think we should all look at it instead of like getting fixated on position. I say this every year. Some people listen, some people don't. But instead of getting fixated on a position, watch college football and ask yourself, who are the difference makers on the field? Is that quarterback a difference maker? Is that wide receiver a difference maker? Is that left tackle a difference maker? Because that's what you should want on your team. Difference makers. People are going to make an impact. Because it does you no good to draft a quarterback if he's not going to do anything, right? If he's not going to be good. It's just a waste of a pick. So keep that in mind when you're watching college football this Saturday. Typically incorrect. Hey, Q, what do you think about the connection between Mendoza and our quarterback coach, Bill Musgrave? Bill was the OC at Cal during Mendoza's freshman year, saw something in him when he was just a 3-star recruit. Cal isn't a powerhouse that's known for getting big-time recruits, but Musgrave must have seen something in him to pick him over the countless other 3-stars. I wonder what insight and influence in the front office opinion of him. Well, I think it's just good that you have somebody on staff with who is projected to be the #1 quarterback in this draft class, as far as like I'm concerned, who has a relationship with that guy, which means he's going to have information that other people don't have. So the Browns can make a more informed decision on if they want to risk it all for Mr. Mendoza. You know, maybe that's what they want to do. Maybe that's not. But having that information on staff, I think is incredibly valuable. Having somebody with those connections on staff, incredibly valuable, right? Having somebody who understands how this guy has practiced when he wasn't guaranteed anything. Incredibly valuable. Having somebody there who understands how this guy likes to go through progression. Valuable. It's a valuable thing. I don't know if it dictates whether they like Mendoza or not. I think that's a bigger decision than Bill Musgrave. But having that information there on hand in staff will give them a more complete picture of who Mendoza is as a prospect, because the big thing about Fernando Mendoza, he's a very, very, very unknown commodity. I mean, he's going to play at Illinois by the time this video is uploaded, or I think tonight. I don't know what time that game is specifically, so we'll know a little bit more, but we're only going to know about 1 season's worth of Fernando Mendoza, right? Nobody watched the Pac-12 ACC stuff at Cal. Y'all weren't watching Cal football. We don't know about that dude. So this is a prospect that not a lot of people have a lot of information on. Not a lot of people anticipate it. Kind of came out of nowhere. So having somebody with that level of information, very, very key. Big Birds Only with the second question says, hey, are we seeing the end of Njoku in Cleveland at the end of this season with the breakout we're seeing with Fannin? Already, will they try to bring him back with an extension in the offseason? I don't know. Because the extension not being done now or even rumored to be happening now is a big red flag that the Browns are okay with letting Njoku walk. Now, it's important to understand that Fannin and Njoku don't do the